This is the first in a series of interviews entitled New Ideas for the New Paradigm for the students of the Master Program, International Relations and Diplomacy at the Faculty of Media and Communications in Belgrade. We have with us tonight Renata Avila, and it's a great pleasure. Renata is a human rights lawyer and has been specialized in intellectual property and technology. She worked as one of the lawyers representing the Guatemalan Nobel Peace Prize laureate Roberta Menchu Tum, and more recently she has been working with Julian Assange and Wikileaks, and she has also been and is on the advisory board of DM25. Hello, Renata. It's a pleasure to have you. So I will have a first question, which is a global one. How is it like to be a human rights lawyer in this new situation with the expansion of digital technologies, the internet, and globalization? A lot of things have changed in the recent years, and I think that also the law systems, there are a lot of confusions. Who is the one that's making the laws? Is the state the one that can control the internet? So lots of privacy issues have also been raised at the moment. So can you tell us, it's a very interesting time to be a human rights lawyer at this?
Well, it is very, very interesting in first place because we are at the moment that never before the world was as unequal as right now. And never before the world was as connected as right now, paradoxically. So this combination of increasing inequality and social injustice, the dismantling of the welfare state, and the leading countries abandoning the universal human rights system, not by words, but by actions, and make it a very, very interesting time to try to activate a system that protects us as humans, regardless our nationality, regardless the place that we were born, or if you are a man or a woman, and or your race and color. And I think that even if the powerful are trying to kill this universality and kill this system that was the promise and was the safeguard of a never again that we activated at the last century, the people are fighting back. And fighting back with little but effective interventions and driving them a little bit crazy. This started, I will say, that the golden era of strategic litigation and innovation in the legal field started with the case of Pinochet, when Judge Baltasar Garzón invented and activated the principle of universal jurisdiction, suing the dictator of Chile in Spanish courts and arresting him while he was in England. And that activated a new era where the concept of jurisdiction as just the sovereign state defending the dictators and shielding them is no longer valid. But what happens now is that, of course, some dictators are easier to catch than others, and some abusers are easier to catch than others. And we have now an increasing complexity of the role of corporations, and the increasingly influential role that corporations play in violating human rights. And because of we have an increased difficulty with the private sector and those profiting from war and from hunger and so on catch up really quickly. And in parallel to the universal human rights system, they develop the universal trade system. So the trap is in the free trade agreements and these new organisms that are not state, that are not people, that start abusing human rights. They have double protection. So corporations are even more protected than people and defended by very powerful states when they violate human rights. So going back to the question, now you have to know more and play by different rules than the traditional human rights lawyers 20 years ago. Today, you have to activate different political avenues in parallel to the legal avenues. For example, there's mechanisms, for example, if there's a corporation violating the human rights of people in Ethiopia right now. That's a concrete example. By selling spying tools to the government of Ethiopia, you activated, okay, you will have a little hope in Ethiopia if you activate the legal avenue there, but then you can see that there's holes, there are hacks in the system that you can do by suing the Italian and British companies selling this software to the government in Ethiopia. So there's an increased solidarity and collaboration across networks of human rights lawyers, and we make that happen. You know, we kind of coordinate. Increasingly, technologies will identify and get the evidence, and you sue them in European courts. Of course, it's complex and it's expensive, and it can just happen in specific cases, but it is the way that is happening right now.
So do you think that the new big maybe revolution will come with these technologies rather than people going on the streets? Or do you think it will be a combination? Do you think this is going to now be a process with, we know that you have also been working with Creative Commons and other organizations you can talk about that have been trying to work on decentralizing these technologies and giving this power to the people, not the corporations. So do you think it is possible that we will maybe make this new better world in a sense using these technologies rather than trying to, I don't know, have an old style revolution, just people yelling on the streets that they want their own rights? Do you think people can maybe work with this?
No, I don't think so. Sadly, we had the chance in around 1994, 1995. We lost the chance. We epically lost the chance, and we bet for centralization and control over freedom and decentralization. That means like lose control, and also more innovation, but also increased risk, you know. And it is really sad to see it happening, because a series of decisions, economic decisions, but also policy decisions, and the decisions on how you govern the global internet meant that we moved from this, okay, anyone on the internet is equal and they can create their companies or their artistic projects and freely exchange information and ideas, to a localized system attached to jurisdictions and attached to rules of specific countries, and an overall rule that is very corporate and pushing for more security and centralization. The concrete example, when we decide to move from the all-purpose computer, like the computers that we transitional kids had the chance to play with, okay, you could have a monitor that was made in China, a keyboard that was made, I don't know, in Taiwan, another piece that was made in Germany. You could connect everything, and it could operate all together, and you could do different things with this machine. You could run programs to like fly rockets, or you could just simply print your cookbook from it. But you had that with the right skills and lots of self-learning. You had that capacity to create many things from it, and it not as sophisticated, and the computational power was very little. But it was you were free to install anything you wanted. You were free to run anything you wanted, and there were not so many authorizations and identifications. That, I mean, before, it is very popular, this joke that on the internet back then, no one would know that if you were a dog. Now the paradigm shifted.
With the global surveillance.
No, not only with the way that these decisions that we took on the internet right now. They would not only know that you are Maja, but probably they will know so intimate details about you. They will know, the computational systems will know more about you than yourself. And that's the change. Yeah. And the change happened when we gave up this decentralized internet, gave up to that old computer that was interoperable, and we replaced it with these mobile phones, you know? Yeah. Now, with these devices and all the economic system behind and the business model behind these devices, that is eat all the data that you can and document all the uses that you can, so we can all build together the most sophisticated advertising platform. We gave up the creative web. We gave up the creative internet, and we sacrificed a platform of communication, and we transformed it in a platform of control.
But do you think that there is a chance, maybe in the future, maybe not near future, but I think that people are becoming more and more aware in lots of ways that I think they're becoming aware of the global surveillance, because there's a lot of talk been going on, and WikiLeaks and Snowden, and we had some revelations that told us about that. And also I think people are maybe, in a very practical sense, getting sick of these social networks and getting overloaded with all of this stuff. Do you think there is a chance that maybe in the near future these, I don't know, technologies like social networks will fail? Like, do you think Facebook will die? I'm just asking this. Will it happen in the near future? Like that people will get so much overloaded with these informations that they will say, okay, we're quitting this, but we want something else. Do you think something like that can happen? Or are we just going in a very disastrous path?
Of course, we cannot give up hope, and there's always a small possibility of taking back these technologies that used to belong to all of us. But I am extremely worried that while we are discussing these things, we are losing the streets, and we are losing the kind of revolutions that made all the social changes possible. And if we lose the streets, if we lose the public square, if we lose the possibility to organize, to collectively and privately organize and demonstrate in the streets, we might lose the possibility of a next revolution, and then we will be losing dissent as we know it. Of course, we might find different ways to protest and different ways to disrupt, but the classical way, I mean, all the revolutions, the recent times started in the streets with people demonstrating. And what is happening now is very, it sounds like science fiction, but actually is worse than science fiction. Not so long ago, protesters in different countries were getting messages on their telephones like, we know that you are part of this protest. You have been registered as part of this protest. You are now in a list. Well, that was completely scary for the people demonstrating in the streets. But now, in the recent Olympic Games in Brazil, was even worse, and also happened in Mexico. The police, with this big data that they are collecting on people, they were able to predict and to identify who were like the key disruptors and the key organizers in a protest, and they were able to arrest them preemptively before the protest took place.
Even happened.
And it's documented. The lawyers were absolutely they finally managed to get them out, but the damage was done because the protest couldn't happen. The same in Mexico, the damage was done because you couldn't organize yourself and protest a policy. They were freed when it was too late, you know? And now it is even more worrying because the CIA has an innovation unit, and they announced a couple of months ago that they have the ability to predict social unrest 5 days before it happens, without even identifying the key people who will lead this disruption. So if they have 5 days notice, and it's something against the interest of the CIA, of course they will deploy all the diplomacy, different forms of diplomacy, and all the power they have to stop this from happening. That can affect elections. That can affect really critical processes. That can affect, for example, if you want to say, no, I don't want Serbia in the European Union. and is against the interest of the most powerful country in the world, they have the ability to absolutely disrupt these ways of exercising your rights. The special rapporteur of the UN on the right to protest is very concerned about it, and he has looked at all these digital dimension of protest as well, and how combined devices with drones monitoring protesters with all these biometric data that we already gave to social networks, this selfie that we take voluntarily, willingly are giving away, this is not leading in a good direction. Yeah.
And can you tell me what is the role of WikiLeaks in all of these things that are happening now, and what is WikiLeaks trying to do in a way to maybe try to change the dynamics of all of these things that are not under our control at the moment? Can you tell us in practical sense how does this whistleblowing thing function? So in a practical sense, if I want to be a whistleblower and I want to leak some files, how do I do it? How does WikiLeaks help me? How do you protect my rights? Lots of people, I think, want to know this practical stuff about the functioning of WikiLeaks.
Basically, in a very idealistic way, the founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, and all the team and all the people supporting believe that a more informed public had more tools to decide their destiny and more informed decisions, and being aware of how this shadow state works, and these things that are not visible by the public, and this vicious media that doesn't show the full picture of the situation. By reversing that and by showing you the full document, the full picture of what's going on, people will start to think and take more informed decisions and not swallow the pill so easily, you know, and not, it's a slow change, but at least you have, it's your choice to be informed or not. And it's your choice if you see a document and you, for example, you are from the blue party and I'm from the orange party, maybe our processing of the document will be very different, but at least we are seeing the full thing. And that's the theory of change of WikiLeaks, by showing the scientific journalism, showing the document as it is, without any filter, without any story attached, so you can make up your mind, will change the things in a better direction. And how can you do it? I mean, WikiLeaks receives submissions and using different methods, but the most secure method for an ordinary citizen is to submit it electronically, ideally from a computer that is not your computer. Mm-hmm. And on the website is step by step all the things that you have to do to anonymize your submission. The more background information that you can attach to it, the better. For example, of course, the resources are limited, and of course, you know more about your local context than anyone else. So imagine that I'm leaking the crucial information about some chemical thing in the food. That I know that I've worked at a food factory, I have seen that the food is poisoned with something that's really damaging for the people of my whole country, but it's very technical and it's chemical things, you know. So ideally, when you submit these documents, and you submit it securely, not from your workplace, but securely, you will add information of reference and maybe suggestions of who to ask, or where else to look at, so to make easier the process of verification of WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is all the time also looking for volunteers, translators, and people who can localize the impact. Currently, we have, for example, some difficulties with special characters. So for Serbia, for example, Cyrillic, it will be like challenging somehow for the programmers to publish it online, as it was with Arabic, with the Syrian files. So it is, there's many, many ways to make this globally available public library of documents in risk of being censored possible. So different ways to help, different ways to, it's not only the submission of the document, but it's also the understanding behind the documents, and that's what the organization does. Of course, it takes priority on things that can impact the maximum number of people, or things that are like so urgent that need to be public immediately. That's why you are hearing and seeing lots of publications about the US this year, or about the TTIP, this secret trade agreement, because there are processes happening right now. But it publishes is the most, it's very successful publisher, like 1 million documents per year is the average. So
and what kind of media do you work with at the moment? Of course, you have a lot of information on WikiLeaks. When you go online, you can't read all of those things, so you have to rely on some media that will make an adequate story of all the informations that we get. So what were your experiences in the past, and if you can tell us how it functions nowadays?
Yeah, it is a process that it changes depending on the publication. In the case, I am not very informed on the case of US election, and my guess, and it's just a guess, is that it went without any media partnership because it was so urgent and so sensitive that it was just the limited team can only publish, you know. A coordination would have meant a very complicated issue, and on top of that, you have most of the media in the US endorsing the candidate of the Democratic Party, so having objective reporting from media endorsing a candidate is almost a joke.
Yeah.
But in other publications, especially in the publications where there's no in-house deep expertise, what WikiLeaks has done is to partner with 3 different kind of organizations. With independent journalists that are invited to participate in the publications. That was the case of the Guantanamo files. One of the top experts was brought in to have primary access to the documents, and together with WikiLeaks designed the strategy of publications to minimize the danger for those who were still in Guantanamo and to maximize the impact and set them free, ideally. That was the case with Guantanamo, for example. With the case of the trade agreements, the partnerships are with think tanks, with experts, and with the organizations who have a deep understanding of how these trade talks happen, and also with media. Media is a specific media covering these kind of stories, but we partner and give advanced access to these experts, because once you go to the media, you can tell which change is very technical, so you can tell them, like, save them time and tell them why it's so important to publish that. And when it is related to a country, of course, or a specific region, as many partnerships with local media as possible.
And so you have been staying in Belgrade recently, and you've been getting to know the scene here, the political situation and everything. Do you think that there is a chance maybe to, in a way, or do you know some organizations that are working in a sense to make whistleblowing more visible? And do you think a country like Serbia should work on that? Because I don't know if there are a lot of leaks from Serbia, adequate leaks. Can you tell us something about the situation?
While I'm not expert in Serbian media scene, I would say that what I'm seeing here is an increased awareness and involvement from especially the young people trying to change politics. But it is still not a safe environment, I will say, for people to come forward and denounce corruption and expose the powerful. So WikiLeaks becomes a very interesting vehicle to make it happen, because WikiLeaks does not publish from here. And the story, even if it will be like done through and in partnership with local Balkan media, I mean, the hit is on WikiLeaks. The hit will not be on the local journalists. So I think that is done carefully and done with following the anonymization steps. It's a great opportunity for those knowing that corruption is happening and having evidence that it is happening. But that's just one piece. The other piece will be like, of course, having always a contingency plan. And if things go wrong, and this person, because sometimes people talk, you know, like you saw it with the case of Snowden. Yeah. Sometimes people want to tell the world that they are the ones.
Yeah.
And if that happens, WikiLeaks created this sister organization called Courage Foundation, which the purpose of this organization is to help the activists obtaining the documents, the whistleblowers, and the sources at risk. And what it tries to give them is to provide legal advice, but also to provide some support and campaign around the issues that they're exposing. And I think it would be quite amazing to have a small chapter of Courage Foundation here, because what we are seeing here is an emergence of civic awareness, and of course there will be cases against this kind of people. And if they know that there's a support network of citizens and volunteering lawyers, volunteering, like you can volunteer in so many ways, you know, they will be more comfortable to come forward.
Okay. I have one short last question, but very important. As we know what kind of world we're living in with white middle-class male power, how is it to be a woman that's been dealing with this really important stuff? Did you have problems being a woman and a human rights lawyer at the same time? What were your experiences? Did you have any difficulties?
Well, you know, sometimes it can be incredibly frustrating because the system has an idea of a powerful, influential person that is a white male. And that implies that sometimes, even if you are at the most important venues at the United Nations or speaking at the European Parliament, people will wait more and report more about the words of your colleague that maybe knows very little about the topic, and just because he's a white male from specific university and pedigree, you know. And that's disappointing somehow, because it is a vicious circle of the media. Media is mostly written by men, and the editorial boards are mostly male and white. And that's reflected in the way that ideas are spread, same as politics. That's the frustrating part. The satisfactory part is that as a woman of color, looking at me, I can get away with so much. I mean, I have never, until now, I have never had a problem at the airport. I have never been harassed. I think that they don't take me seriously somehow, and that's an advantage. I mean, sometimes you are more invisible, and sometimes intelligence services and those in power do not think that you are powerful at all. And there's some power on it, you know, there's some ability to navigate spaces and to assist people that are at risk. That is an advantage. This is like a sort of camouflage, you know. You can look like this little dog and be like a wolf behind. So that's the advantage. But of course, there's a lot of big fights for equality, and big fights also for more women whistleblowers to come forward.
Yeah, of course.
We haven't seen many, but it is also because of the big disbalance in power and the fears and the retaliation the woman can face if telling the truth. But as I said, it can be an advantage. Even your weakest point, you can transform it in an advantage, and you can use it for good.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Renata, a lot. And Renata will be having a big lecture at the Faculty of Media and Communications on the digital despot in December. So we welcome you to come and hear her again. Thank you, Renata.
Thank you, Maja.